other day I had this hangout with Angel and we were talking about static electricity, and even if it wasn't quite the same as the experiments that were being shown, Angel felt that the Giza pyramids were harnessing static electricity and that they had it back when they were using the pyramids. Now James sent me this after he watched it, saying that there was arcing swords used in shows in London in the 17th and 18th century. So it just added to my video that I was making today about jousting, because they have a lance, but even that's all crazy. We'll just go through the pictures because obviously here we go. So this is Arthur's sword. Now it's supposed to be mythical, but the Charlemagne family in France have one of the swords, and those are the swords. Now I thought that Arthur only had one and it was called Excalibur, but Excalibur is a French word. Arthur was French, not English. Well, he's definitely mentioned in France, let's put it that way. And how could that be if he was supposed to be some sort of king here? But those are his swords. So they had to have had some qualities if they could be used like this. One of the swords can go into rock, you know, and I was wondering whether it was the same thing that James was talking about. That, with the arkings. So obviously they had a lot better understanding about what was going on in their environment than we do. But anyway, that's who the sword is related to, the Charlemagne family. And they are French, and they are in the royal family of the French. But you see, when you look up the word Excalibur, comes from the old word escabalior, which comes from the medieval Latin word Caliburnus, which comes from the Welsh word cladi, whatever that is. I can't speak Welsh. Even though I'm half Welsh, I can't speak it. But there you go, and you think it's all relating back to the French. I thought that was quite amazing. And that Excalibur is a French word. I mean, that is all over our history, and it's a French word. Anyway, so I started looking up a bit about jousting. So it's a game. Jousting is a physical, brutal, grueling sport. Obviously with very heavy armour, on horseback, 2 knights with lances for a tournament. So basically they've got you believing that they had like just a spike on the end, even though it was called a lance, and that these were to kill people. But when you actually look up information about jousting, the ends were blunted so that they didn't actually kill people. It was a competition. This is crazy, right? So the jousting goes back to 1154, and the Pope's talking about it there. You're like, wow, back that far? So obviously, what is a jousting pole? But they're making it look like it had a spear on the end. Oh, look at this. Jousting originated in the Roman era, but became what we know as it today during the reigns of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Look, I'm really sorry, everybody. Henry VIII and Elizabeth I were part of the Roman Empire. We've never got rid of the Romans. They've always been here. So he might be Henry VIII in this country and she was Elizabeth I in this country, but you'll probably find that a lot of the kings and queens had other countries, just like Prince Philip was Prince of Greece and Prince of, oh gosh, what is it, Denmark or whatever it is. He had 2 countries, which if he'd been king of would have made him a bit of an emperor. We've never got rid of it. And don't forget, Prince Philip and the Queen, because they're cousins, are Romanovs. So they just changed the words a little bit, but all back to the Roman era. I thought, oh no, not again. Everything relates back to these bloody Romans, and they're still here and they're still running us today. They've just changed their names a little bit so that you don't realise, like the Roman Empire turned into the British Empire. Same thing, just changed its name. Anyway, I thought that was quite incredible. linking it to the Roman Empire, and they still carried on even though they were a different dynasty, but they're not because they're part of the same dynasty. Anyway, it said it was basic. It started to fall from favour in the 1600s because basically they had gunpowder now, you know, bombs and things like that they could do, and fire things. So the armour wasn't needed anymore. So they got rid of the jousting and they got rid of the armour. But when you look, see, he's got a big long pole. It hasn't got a spike on the end, but they never would have had spikes because they weren't to kill. It was all about competitions. This one explains that Henry VIII fell off his horse and hurt himself. Some of them, you could fold them up and take them with you. But imagine the weight of the suit and then the lancer. See, they have not got spikes on the end because they weren't for killing people. They were all about competitions. Now in films, it's all about killing people. But when you look up information, it's about having a competition. Yeah, these are some of the weights of things. I think there might even be a Roman one in here as well, because I thought, yes, has to, you know, even when you're not talking about the Romans, they seem to slip in the internet. So they had quite a lot of armour and the stick. They probably just sat there and they just pointed the stick because they couldn't really do much else. But I think it explains in here in a minute about the shape of the lance. But in your mind, you always think that it's to do with killing people, but it wasn't. It was a competition. And they had these competitions, supposedly. But it just made me think, with James's question about the swords being arced, that if they had that back then, they probably had it here. So this is saying gunpowder weapons took over, so you didn't need the knights. Gunpowder, the armoured suits, obsolete. There it is. About the same weight as the other ones. It's all part of the same thing. And most people know that that suit of armour, when you look at it, there's no way you can do anything in it. You can't turn your neck. You can't do all sorts of things because it's such an awkward thing. And yet before that, they were wearing like chainmail kind of armour which protected them, and then they turned it into this hideous looking thing, all heavy and that. But maybe that was because they just used that for the jousting. I don't even get this, because at one point the armies were wearing just this, just that as armour, and it was enough to protect them. Okay, maybe some of the weapons changed, but that protected them. And then you do see pictures of these people with chainmail and armour on top. There's another one. What's that one down there? Let's have a look. Well, there's one over here, but there you go. He's got, well, he's Chinese, that one. Let's go over here. There's another one. Oh, come on. So they've got bits of armour around the chainmail. But don't you think it's incredible that this was enough to protect you, the chainmail, right? This was enough to protect you. I mean, having that much chainmail on you must have weighed something, but it's much lighter than wearing this. And then they go from the chainmail to that. But I mean, if you look at the suit of armour, the body is completely protected, maybe from an arcing sword, an arcing lance, who knows, but that's what I tried to make the video about. And then James said it about the 16th and 1700s, 17th, 18th, yeah, the other way around. I never get that when they're talking about they're calling it the 18th century, but it's the 1700s. I think that's really weird myself, but yeah. And then we go into that. But you know, I showed you the video with Angel about the fact that if you're inside something and protected, it's okay when the arcing happens. So maybe they understood all that, to have suits of armour like that. Not much has changed. You've still got lances and everything, but they're wearing that. After that, they had bombs and everything, and lancing and all those things became redundant, obsolete. But I still just think it's all crazy, don't you? That basically jousting was for tournaments, but they used it in combat. But they were using it anyway in combat, so that's all weird. Anyway, we'll show that in a little bit. And there it is. It fell out of favour in the 16th century again there. So, let's have a look at this one. Jousting is physically brutal. Each jouster wears up to 100 pounds of armour and can expect to be hit by a lance weighing 15 to 25 pounds carried by a rider atop a 1,500 pound draft horse that is galloping at approximately 30 miles an hour. So it was obviously a rough sport, but have you watched rugby and been on the sideline? That's a pretty rough sport as well. What does that say? So that's just explaining that Henry was injured, another person injured. It was dangerous because obviously they are pointing a lance at you. That one's saying that you had to be born, if you wanted to be a knight, you had to be born into it. Well, that's the Roman thing, isn't it? A little bit more. Oh, this is it. Look at the size of the horses. Typically used range from Shetland ponies to the smallest children to the quarter horses. But look at the size of them. We're going to the next one now. The next picture will tell you. Come on. Because I've recorded this obviously and then I'm speaking over the top. There you go. Look at that. That is what they're saying the size of the horses were. They were 4 foot 10 inches. That's not that tall. They're not great, big, enormous horses. So that's incredible, isn't it? Who would have thought that? They were pony-sized, modern standards. Of course, this is the kind of... So that's crazy, isn't it? The ponies, or the horses, weren't very big. And this is the kind of armour that they've got on. The horse couldn't even get to 30 miles an hour with all that on it. With all that weight. I mean, they have to be trained, the horses, because of noises, banging, friction, all sorts of things. So the horse can cope with all of it. I mean, just look at some of the armour. It's just incredible that they'd be wearing that on a horse. See, like, you can't move. It's just in position so that they could do the jousting. There you go. Now, were weapons rounded off during jousting tournaments for safety? Weapons were often blunted before fights in order to prevent serious injury. So they're not what you think they are. They were just for tournaments. I'm glad that the internet sometimes disagrees with the Romans. Probably will change now because I've noticed it, but King Henry II of France died in a jousting accident there. And then there's ways of holding it, tilting it, and what it means. What it was is I was just watching a film last night. It was called, let's have a look at this one. It was called The Last Joust. It was about, it had Matt Damon had married this woman and someone raped her. And she stood up and she said, he raped me. So her husband had to defend her. And if he lost, she was guilty. And if he won, she was innocent, which is just ridiculous, isn't it? But basically, if she lost, basically all these horrible things were going to happen to her. And they would burn her at the stake. And she just had a baby. But she wanted to carry forward. And it was a gruesome fight. Her husband won. And then she ended up having the life she wanted with her little boy. But they're using it as, it's a weapon. But it was a competition. So that the jousts were never had pointed ends on. That would be a spear. and lances aren't that. So that just talks about what's the difference between a lance and a jousting lance. So there you go. They were made for competitions. Now, I thought it was more to do with fighting. But, you know, this is how they killed each other off, or part of it. But it wasn't. It was about competitions. You see there? Look, this one here. So they want to show you that a lance looks like this, but it wouldn't have done. I think we have another picture coming up. So this was on that site there. So it didn't have a pointy top like that. It had one like that, which would have caused, obviously, a bit of damage, but maybe not life-threatening. Because it wasn't about killing the opponent with the lances. It was about knocking them off their horse. Which is probably obvious, isn't it? But you always think, well, someone's going to die because they're having a fight and they lance each other. Oh, that's it. He's dead. But what it was is they'll say that this will knock them off their horse. And then after that, because a lot of the poles broke, you know, the lances broke, that basically they would get a sword out and finish off. But I was still wondering whether all this stuff was arced. How do we know now that all this stuff wasn't part of it? I don't know. It's just with King Arthur's swords, then the fact James says things are arced back in the 17th, 18th century, so that ought to be the 1700s. That kind of made sense, maybe. Maybe that's why they wore all that metal. Faraday cage? I don't know. There you go, look. There you go. It had a ball or a blunt end to provide striking surface which hopefully would not cause injury. Later lances would be either of softer wood or be weakened so that they would break on impact, as the point of the latter medieval joust shifted from unhorsing an opponent to seeing how many lances the two could break. A battle lance was made of stiff hard wood and had a sharp point which was intended to cause injury. So they've changed their mind there. But well, after telling you that it was a gruesome sport and competition, it says here, when I put in what is a battle lance, it says a battle lance is a long, sharp, spear-like weapon used by cavalry soldiers in mounted combat. So there they're saying that it was used in combat. A long wooden shaft with a sharp metal point. Thrusting weapon used by cavalry soldiers in mounted combat. Used by ancient Assyrians and Egyptians, and Egyptians, and widely used by the Greek and the Romans. Wow. Longer, thicker and heavier than an infantry spear, often equipped with a van plate to prevent the hand from slipping up the shaft, held with one hand over the head grip. Lancers often carried swords, axes or maces for hand-to-hand combat. Sounds horrible, doesn't it? A leading weapon in cavalry charges during classical and medieval warfare. Well, it stopped in the 1600s. It was there in the 1100s. The word lance comes from the Roman word lancia, which was referred to a javelin or a spearing throw. The English verb to launch comes from the same term. I've obviously put in, what is a battle lance? When was it used? So here it says it's used by them, the Greeks and the Romans, which is before horses and medieval and jousting, which did not appear till the 6th century, but it's used by them. Before it was jousting. So it's not called jousting here, but the lance was used when the British defeated or were retreating or against retreating Boers at the Battle of that one on the 21st of October 1889. So this one says, what is the difference between a jousting lance and a war lance? Instead of the sharp tip of the war lance, a jousting lance has a blunt tip with a wider impact surface, putting more force into the impact on the shield rather than impaling the opponent. The tip of the lance is made from a metal and is usually in the shape of a first or three prong flared out from the centre. So that's for jousting. But the war lance is already being used, so they just changed it a bit into jousting. What did the so then it goes back to medievals, and obviously there you go, the Vikings had lances. So there you go. What's your thoughts to all that? They were competitions. It probably was all that was, but who knows? Because if they could arc electricity in those days, then they're obviously a lot more advanced, because we don't go around with things that are arced, do we, using them. That talks about the hussars there, but anyway, this was because I'd showed James that video, and that's all to do with the pyramids. Because Angel thinks that they were arcing electricity in the pyramids. Anyway, what's your thoughts to all that with jousting? Watch the video, tell me what you think, and leave your comments below. And don't forget, sub to the channel if you're not subbed.